Shana Tova. In my work with interfaith groups and in scouts with Christians, particularly Christian clergy, I have noticed that they use the word faith as a synonym for religion more than we do, such as, what does your faith teach about abortion? Or tell us about the holidays in your faith tradition. I've never been very comfortable with that usage of the word, because unlike some other religions where mere belief is good enough, Judaism is strongly geared towards actions. How we treat other human beings, observing periods of rest, performing rituals, taking care of and improving the world that we live in, and doing numerous other mitzvot. And Judaism is more than just a religion, but also a culture, a tribal identity, and so many more things. But nevertheless, the Torah portion we read today, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, does seem to be all about having faith. God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son, the son he and Sarah have hoped for their entire lives. And Abraham's response is the single word, Hineni, here I am. No arguments, no discussions, just Hineni. And then he takes Isaac and 2 servants off to Mount Moriah to perform the sacrifice as God has instructed. The Torah tells us this is a test. And at least on the surface, the test seems to be whether Abraham's faith in God is strong enough that he is willing to sacrifice his beloved son just because God says so. On Isaac's part, he does seem to catch on as he and his father head up the mountain with all the paraphernalia needed to perform a sacrifice except for an animal. He asks his father where the sheep is, and Abraham seems to brush him off by saying, God will provide one. Now, in surrounding cultures of the time, as some understand it, it was common to sacrifice firstborns. We can perhaps see that reflected in other firstborn and first fruit rituals that we find in the Torah. So it seems likely that Isaac, being a firstborn, would have gotten the picture. But to his credit, he goes on without a word. If he does understand, then he allows himself to be that sacrifice, demonstrating his own faith in his father and in God. Now, the simplest reading of this text is that the test is Abraham's faith and obedience, and he passes that test. Last year, though, I pointed out a different reading of the text, that the test was whether Abraham would object and argue with God over an act that he should understand is wrong. In this reading, Abraham fails the test, and God never speaks to him again. This year, I'd like to propose yet another reading of the text, that it is about faith, but not faith in what you may think. Now I want to go back just a little before this part of the Torah to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where God tells Abraham that he is going to completely destroy these cities. And Abraham argues with him, bargaining down the number of righteous people needed to save the entire city. During this argument, Abraham pointedly asks God, does the judge of all the world not do justice? The Midrash points out that by changing one vowel of this sentence, and remember, there really aren't any vowels in the Torah, so really changing nothing significant. The question then becomes a statement. The judge of all the world does not do justice. The Midrash continues, if you want a world, you cannot have justice. If you want justice, you cannot have a world. You are trying to grab a rope at both ends. You want both a world and justice. But if you do not let go of justice, there can be no world. If God were to judge us with absolute justice, then none of us would survive, because all humans are imperfect, and we all make serious errors. In this Midrash, Abraham teaches God that mercy and judgment is required for humanity to exist. Indeed, we find this idea frequently in our High Holiday liturgy. We ask God to have mercy upon us and tip the scales of justice in our favor. We could never live up to a standard of absolute, strict justice, so we pray for God's mercy, the mercy that in this Midrash, God learns from Abraham. So in today's Torah reading, Abraham's faith is perhaps not the faith to obey blindly, but the faith, the certainty that God has learned mercy and will apply the element of mercy and is not going to actually go through with what is being asked of Abraham. Abraham is just waiting for God to say, okay, you can stop now. There are perhaps some clues to support this. Abraham's response that God is going to provide an animal to sacrifice, which God does do in the end. and that he tells his two servants, when he goes up the mountain, that he and Isaac are going up the mountain, and we will return. We. And perhaps also why the action seems to suddenly move slowly as Abraham reaches out his hand, grasps onto the knife, and goes to slaughter his son, leaving every opportunity for the angel to call out to him and tell him to stop. And perhaps this then gives a clue to why we read this story of all things on Rosh Hashanah, the so-called birthday of the world. The obvious Torah reading would be creation, but instead we have stories from the Abraham cycle. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Din, the day of judgment. According to one strand of Jewish thought, this is the anniversary of the first day of judgment, the day that Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden. And indeed, our tradition also considers it to be a precursor to the great day of judgment that will lead to the Messianic era. With all this judgment going on, whether by God or by each other, we need to remember the importance of mercy in the universe. As the Midrash taught, a world that operates on strict, harsh judgment cannot be sustained. So we keep asking God to exercise mercy upon us because we are imperfect beings, and without that mercy we could not exist. And on these days, like Abraham and Isaac, we put our faith in that mercy, that whatever we have done as individuals, as a community, as a world, that we will be granted some mercy in exchange for a renewed effort to do better in the year to come. The only mitzvah for Rosh Hashanah that is unique to the holiday is the hearing of the shofar. There are a number of explanations as to the significance of the shofar to this holiday, since the Torah doesn't explain it to us. In fact, surprisingly, the Torah doesn't even explicitly tell us what instrument to make the blast song. But one explanation is that the shofar is an allusion to the story of the binding of Isaac. After Abraham is told to stop, he sees a ram with its horn caught in a thicket and sacrifices that ram instead of Isaac. The implication is that God arranged for that ram to be there, caught by its horn. And so the use of the shofar, a ram's horn, or at least from a similar animal, is a reminder not only to us, but to God of the Akedah, of the dedication and faith shown by Abraham and Isaac, but also perhaps of the mercy that they believed would be forthcoming. And so today, we want to remind God that just like Abraham and Isaac, despite our human imperfections, we too hope for mercy. And we remind ourselves of the possibility of mercy, even where we might believe that only harsh judgment is possible. While the concept of a day of judgment and God sitting at the head of a court inscribing us in one book or another may have profound resonance to some, we also need to understand this day on a human level. After all, one of the key ideas the Torah teaches is that we as humans are made in the image of God. Therefore, if we seek forgiveness and mercy from God, we are also obliged to let mercy tip the scales of judgment when we judge others. And we need to go to those whom we have offended, make restitution, ask forgiveness, change our ways, and appeal to their sense of mercy as well. And we must not forget also to offer mercy to ourselves. Sometimes we are our own worst critics. We need to give ourselves permission to be imperfect humans, for that is how we were created. If we judge ourselves only with strict justice, then we are creating a reality that cannot hold. And so, while our actions play an important role in our Judaism today, and throughout the year, perhaps on these high holidays more than any other time, the importance of faith in Judaism comes to the forefront, reestablishing faith in our fellow human beings, in ourselves, in God, and in humanity as a whole, that we will strive to improve in each other's eyes and in our own eyes, and faith that we will both be offered mercy and that we will be able to reach inside ourselves and offer mercy to others whom we have judged, perhaps for good reason. After all, here we are, hundreds, thousands of years after the Akedah, still here because God has ultimately chosen mercy over harsh judgment of our people and of humanity time after time. Because God has faith in us to continually try to improve ourselves and in the universe, whose creation that we commemorate today. Shana Tova.